So, as we creep ever closer to TBC, people are starting more and more with their preparations. And one thing that people are considering using for preparations is going to be the fact that in the Burning Crusade pre-patch, we're going to gain access to rank 14 PvP gear for level 60, regardless of whatever rating you have. Now, this is potentially going to lead to massive gear upgrades for a lot of people. However, maybe not all, and that's the focus of this video today. Now, I've seen this covered by a few other people, but there has been some class bias in the videos that I've seen, or maybe they haven't looked at every aspect that needs to be covered, in my opinion, in order to be able to get a full-on grasp of whether you should or should not be grinding out all of your gear at rank 14 in the pre-patch. So today, what I'm hoping to do is going to have a quick glance over what it is that you're going to be looking at to get, the reasons that you might want to get it, who does need it, who doesn't need it, and also a class by class breakdown of whether it's maybe worth for you as opposed to one of your friends, because your class benefits more than theirs will. So let's dive into it first with some of the real easy basic stuff to cover. So first up, we've got the 3 types of people that I believe simply do not need to go about getting any of this gear. Now, these are all relatively straightforward, so we'll fly through them pretty quick, but first off, if you are already in fantastic gear, so if you are fully decked out in Nax gear, or most likely even if you're just in full AQ or even Blackwing Lair gear, you're probably going to already be at a standard where you're either wearing better than this gear, or you are wearing something so close in its proportional power that it's not worth the epic amount of grinding required to be able to get this gear. Now, second is going to be the people who don't really care about optimizing. I know it sounds stupid, but a lot of people want to play at their own pace. They're not really worried about min-maxing. They just want to enjoy the leveling experience, at which point there is absolutely no reason to go through this massive grind in order to get the gear. Unless, of course, you do want to have a really easy time of it when you are questing through the TBC and enjoying the experience, by all means do so. But for what you're actually looking to do, the gear isn't actually a requirement for you. And finally, we're looking at people like myself who just despise PvP, or I should probably clarify, PvP in Classic WoW. It's really not my cup of tea. And if you are someone who hates doing PvP in Classic WoW, and it's going to be a grind that gets to your soul and it's going to make you not want to play the game, then just don't do it. The gear's great, but it's not worth putting yourself through that if it's something that you really don't enjoy. This is a game at the end of the day, and if you want to just go into TBC and do some pretty standard leveling, you're not going to require this gear to do it. If anything, it's complete overkill, so don't even look into it. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about something I've alluded to, and that is the grind required to get these items. Now, simply for a complete set of the 6 pieces required for the set, for any given class, you are going to need the following: 70 Arathi Basin Mark of Honours, 50 Alterac Valley Mark of Honours, 30 Warsong Gulch Mark of Honours, and 65,025 Honour. Now, that is quite some margin. I know that 65,000 Honour number seems pretty high, and while I have no means of testing this from myself, what I've been able to establish from other people is that you will actually get that quite comfortably in the time it takes you to get your marks. Now, I can't confirm or deny that, but nevertheless, it is a really large number. And if we were to look simply at the Marks of Honour, which you can farm out now before the pre-patch, but only 20 of each, after which you will still then be forced into farming them out during pre-patch, which is going to take 10 wins for Warsong Gulch, roughly is that about 15 wins in Alterac Valley, and about 25 wins in Arathi Basin in order to be able to get all of the pieces. That's a lot of PvP, and it isn't something that should be undertaken lightly. Now, of course, that is for the entirety of the 6 pieces that are required for the set. However, something else that people might be looking into is also going to be the weapons. And the weapons are going to set you back quite an extra amount on top of that. Now, one-handed weapons and offhands and things of that nature are going to take 20 Arathi Basin Marks of Honour each, and as well 15,000 more Honour. Of course, if you're going to dual wield, you'll need 2, so it's going to be 40 Arathi Basin Marks of Honour, as well as that 30,000 Honour. If, however, you are someone who uses a two-hander, you're still going to need the 30,000 Marks of Honour, and you are still going to need 40 marks. However, those 40 marks are now going to be from Alterac Valley. That might actually influence the way that you choose to go if you are someone who has an option in regards to whether they want one hands out or a two-hand, as well as also being someone who potentially has a preference in battlegrounds. Now that's all of the simple stuff out of the way, but now comes for the more complicated part. Is it worth it? And this is something that is going to vary quite a lot. And the first thing that I want to say to people is that you are going to want to make your own decision on whether or not this grind is worth it for you. However, we will go through each of the classes individually and discuss their set bonuses as well as the stats on any of their given items, as well as also I'll present it all on the screen for you with the table that I got from Wowhead. That will hopefully give you a stats breakdown to decide if individual pieces might be something that is worth it for you. Now, personally, before we begin, I would like to point out that what I am doing, as well as what may be the correct thing for you to do, and that is to cherry pick individual pieces that you require for your character. So, for example, you see me here on my rogue, enduring what can only be described as a horrible Arathi Basin. And this was to start getting the marks in place to get my weapons. My rogue is currently wearing Dungeon Set 2, and honestly, the upgrade from the items at rank 14 is pretty substantial, but I can certainly get by with my Dungeon Set 2 without any real issue. My weapons, however, are pre-raid bis from first phase. Yeah, not great. And that's something that I'm looking to change. So in my opinion, I think for my rogue, I'm going to be getting myself the weapons, but I'm going to call it there. And if you are in a similar position, perhaps maybe you just have really bad gloves or really bad boots, and you're just wanting to go and replace those pieces, that's something that you absolutely can do and something that might well make the grind a bit more reasonable for you. But with that said, let's have a look at some of the weapons. So I've thrown up some of the weapons on screen here that I think are going to be some of the most popular that people might be picking from. Now, I have thrown up the Alliance variants, but it is the exact same Alliance and Horde, other than the fact that they have different names, so just don't worry about that. In terms of the stats, they're all going to be exactly the same. Now, this is going to work quite well for people who have a good understanding of their class and know what stats they want and what they're currently equipped with, so that they can see roughly a proportional upgrade amount for any given weapon and then decide for themselves whether the grind is worth it. So these are, like I say, not a full encompassing list of all of the items, but there is a good chance that the items that you are going to be considering are presented for you on screen now. As a general rule of thumb, I would say that the weapons might be worth the investment from people if you are playing a class that is perhaps most likely a melee class that's going to have much more reliance on the strength of its weapon, as well as maybe someone who is distinctly lacking in weapons because they are such an incredible part of your kit in terms of how much they provide to your output. As well as also if you are somebody who has access to a particular weapon type that is incredibly required in order for your class to function well. Say, for example, you are playing an orc and you want to take advantage of axes, and while there are other upgrade weapons for you along your route to 70, they may not all be axes, so getting one of them specifically that's good for you might well be a challenge, so then you might want to factor that in on whether or not it's worth for you. Similarly, if you're going to be leveling as daggers rogues or swords rogue, it's going to work much the same, so do bear that in mind. But now, moving on to the classes, and we will start with the Druid. Now, the first thing I want to get out of the way is what you're actually looking at on screen here. Now, what you're going to be seeing at the most notable parts is what the kit looks like, if that matters to you, the set bonuses, and also the breakdown of the stats on the items down below in that table. Now, one thing that I do want to stress is that the percentage values, if they are displayed in green, it means that there is some percentage values on the item, and it simply equates to sub 1%. I don't understand why it doesn't round it up or show the actual amount provided, but anything that does say 0% does in fact provide something of that stat. If it provided nothing, it would simply be blank, such as, for example, the melee critical strike rating on the shoulders is indeed 0, while there is some on the head. Secondly, I am going to be flying through these relatively quickly in a view to keep this video quite short for you, mainly discussing the set bonuses and allowing you guys to take a look at the stats of the items for yourself to decide if it's going to be an upgrade. Do bear in mind these item stats are accurate as of the pre-patch and not as of right now. So if you are comparing them to what you are wearing, do compare them to the stats of your items when it comes to pre-patch and not their current stats, as they will change. With all that out of the way, what I would say is that you are looking at an interesting set bonus in terms of the Druid. So we're pretty much going to ignore the 2-piece set bonus for this video because it's plus 20 stamina regardless of what class we're discussing, and that's just some more flat health, which is great. Your 6-piece bonus, much the same, is going to be attack power and or spell power depending on what class we're talking about, so we're pretty much going to skim over that too, with the 3-piece bonus being of interest to us. Not only because it's the one that varies by class, and in the case of the Druid is actually a pretty decent one for those of you considering this for while you are leveling your Druid, as it is going to provide movement speed while outdoor and in any of your forms, which if you are questing in the open world for doing your leveling, then that is something that you may want to consider because that is actually pretty fantastic. And to my understanding, it does work in dungeons that are considered outdoor dungeons as well. The other thing of note is that it is a 3-piece set bonus, which does mean that you can get the 3 pieces of gear that provide you with the melee and ranged critical strike rating that you see displayed there. So if that is a stat that you really prioritise, which I know a lot of people do, then you could consider simply getting the legs, chest and helmet, which will give you access to your best stats on the items, as well as also get you that 3-piece set bonus. Now next up we have the Shaman, and it's at this point that I realise that there's one thing that I haven't overlooked but I'm simply not mentioning in this video, which is that each piece of the gear, which is the gloves for everybody apart from I believe the rogue, where it is the boots, does have a special feature on them that is an adaptation to a single spell for your class. All of these are pretty decent but not anything to write home about, so I'm simply just not including that as a factor in whether you do or do not pick up the item. So moving on from that, with Shamans you can see that your critical strike rating and your spell damage and healing is all notably spread out across multiple items, and that might want to make you consider which items you pick up if you are going to pick up any for leveling your Shaman. But what we're really of interest here, like we've established before, is the 3-piece bonus, which is plus 2% critical strike with all shock spells, which I would much again describe as being something that's really nice to have, but far more underwhelming than the Druid one, and is probably not something worth going out of your way for if you are already somewhat decent geared. However, if you are looking to get this rank 14 gear, that is something that you will actually feel the impact of, I suppose, as opposed to some of the others we will discuss from here on in. So next up, we're going to talk about the Warrior, and the Warrior is quite an interesting one. So reducing the cooldown of Intercept on your 3-piece set bonus is something that you will be able to make advantage of. It does reduce the cooldown by 5 seconds. Again, it's not something massive, but it is probably a lot more impactful than some of the others. However, it is going to be something that I would say you're going to see more benefit from if you are leveling through dungeons than if you were to level out in the open world. Simply because I think that reduced cooldown is going to be more likely something that you're going to have a capacity to get value out of in a dungeon as opposed to out in the open world, where mobs are probably going to be more competitively farmed, so you're going to have a difficulty getting a mob per cooldown of your intercept anyway. Other things of note here are going to be the fact that the shoulders, boots and legs are all going to provide hit rating, which is a massively underrated stat for leveling, especially if you are going to be someone who's trying to level through dungeons where bosses will be of a higher level to you once again, or if you're going to be someone who's leveling through questing but doing so in a higher level zone as soon as possible to get ahead of the pack. This hit rating will really help you to get some more damage out on those higher level mobs to make your leveling more efficient. Now next up we're going to have the Mage, and the Mage in my opinion is one of the least sought after rank 14 gears when it comes to use for leveling, simply because it's lacking in hit rating on everything apart from the boots, And while there is value in the 2-second reduction on the cooldown of your blink, I don't think it's particularly impactful. As for the rest of the items, they are going to provide you a decent amount of critical strike on the critical strike appropriate spells, spell penetration on the shoulders, and also a decent chunk of spell damage across the board. They're by no means bad items, but it's certainly not worth going out of your way for if you have anything else currently that is competitive. Now, I have an interesting one here in the form of the Rogue. Now, the Rogue has got 4 pieces that have hit rating on, which again, if they are something that is going to be of help to you when you are leveling because you're doing it through dungeons or in high level zones, that hit rating is going to be something that's very much worth your while getting. But on top of that, this is the only class where I would recommend picking up the piece that provides the additional functionality. So in the case of the Rogue, like I said earlier on, it is going to be the boots, and they are going to provide you with an additional 3 seconds on your sprint. This is something that I think could have a lot of value if you are leveling, no matter what way you're leveling, because getting to that mob quicker than the other guy to tag it, or simply being able to run away from a boss to live longer and get your vanish off if something goes wrong in dungeon leveling, is something that is going to be very helpful potentially. Beyond that, I think there's some of the best itemized items, and it's something that is going to be a relatively fantastic pickup if you don't already have decent gear. The 3-piece for the cooldown on Gouge is nice, but again, I don't think it's something all that fantastic. However, if you are going to pick up those boots and all of the pieces that have hit rating on, you would only be 1 piece away from the 6-piece bonus anyway. So next up, we're going to talk about the Hunter, and the Hunter does have one of the better set bonuses in reducing the cooldown of concussive shot by 1 second. It is only 1 second, but like we've already said, these set bonuses aren't ever anything too spectacular, and that's one that you probably can actually get some value out of. In terms of your hit rating, you're going to find that only on the shoulders and boots, but you do find crit on all of the rest of the items as well, so it is certainly going to be pretty decent itemized gear, so perhaps one that is worth picking up for its set bonuses, but certainly worth picking up for the actual gear standards itself, and also one that is going to be pretty nice if you are someone who's already semi-geared and simply wants a decent piece to replace a particularly poor piece you have, as long as it is one of these 6 pieces, it is probably going to be decent for you. Next up, we're going to be talking about the Paladins, and they're in an interesting position. The Hammer of Justice 10-second cooldown removal is going to be absolutely fantastic, and that is something I highly recommend getting if at all possible. As for the actual itemizations themselves, they are going to be really decent if you are playing as Ret or if you are playing as Holy. Personally, I think the lack of defense rating means that they are pretty much unviable for tanking, but that being said, it is going to be a decent starting point, and perhaps you could pick up some strong defense rating items or things to cover the gaps that might help make this feel a bit more viable for prot as well. Now next up, we're going to talk about the Warlocks, and the Warlocks have an interesting one, being the only class that apparently, according to Wowhead, does not have any hit or crit on their gear, meaning itemization wise it is somewhat less viable. That being said, it does have 0.2 seconds off of the cast time of Fear, so if you are playing a way of leveling your Warlock that does utilise Fear, then that is something that you may want to consider, but certainly one of the weaker options in terms of their rank 14 gear, so if you do have anything that is more sustainable, something that's a bit more viable, I would highly recommend sticking with that. There are plenty of good alternatives out there for Warlocks if you get your Warlock leveled in time to take advantage of some of the raids in Classic before TBC comes out. Now lastly, and also sadly lastly in my opinion in terms of its calibre, we have the Priest gear. Now, once again, I'm not sure if this is a Wowhead issue, but I can't find the information better anywhere else, and it is suggesting that there is no hit or crit on any of the gear, nor even any MP5 for a healer based set. Not entirely sure whether this is completely accurate or not for the priests, but if it is, it does mean that these are some of the most underwhelming pieces we've looked at so far, and the 3-piece set bonus of adding 1 second additional duration to Psychic Scream in a leveling environment is perhaps also one of the weakest as well, so I would say perhaps not worth going out of your way for a priest if you can get your hands on better from elsewhere. But that's about all that I have for you today, guys. I do hope that you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please do let me know by liking this video and consider subscribing to the channel. If you have any more questions on this subject, then please do leave them down in the comment section below, because I will do my utmost to answer each and every one of you if that proves to be feasible. But for now guys, thanks for watching, I hope to see you in the next one. Later!